So, welcome. I wanted to talk about the second rank. Last week we did the first rank. So Dongshan, Chinese Zen master who wrote the 5 ranks. And you were here last week, right?
It was not.
Oh, okay. Well, then I'll have to do a quick recap. So Dongshan was a Chinese Zen master living in the 800s, and he wrote the 5 ranks of enlightenment, essentially. And the 5 ranks interrelate to each other, and we move through them as practitioners all of the time. So Tozan is his Japanese name, because all these guys have like Chinese and Japanese translations of their names. And so last week we talked about the first rank. And what they really are is there's a poem for each one, and then commentary on the poems. And so the first poem is the apparent within the real, right? So the real is like the absolute. And it's actually important to clarify something, right? Because in English, a lot of times we use the word emptiness. And we use the word emptiness to mean both like the absolute, but also the shape of like physical forms. Because we say form is emptiness, right? So you could say that like, my eyes are empty. I didn't need glasses, now I do, right? Everything's always changing. And things are always changing because everything is dependently arisen. In other words, we don't have anything that arises independently, right? Things are always interdependent on each other and arise in conditions created by the interaction of many things. And so nothing has any fixed form, right? Everything's impermanent, and that can be said to be empty. So pausing there for a second, does that make sense?
You mean empty in meaning or empty in...
I mean literally empty of a fixed form, right? Like, it may not look like it, but my face must be aging every second because it used to be young and wrinkle-free, and now it isn't, right? So how did that happen? Well, it's empty. But my face is also a form, right? So we also talk about, sometimes we'll say like the absolute or the real. So that's unity, that's oneness, that's the experience that we can't name. That's the first page of the Tao Te Ching, where it says, if you can talk about it, that's not it, right? Which even talking about it is a form.
Naming is the beginning of particular things or something.
Right, precisely. And so when we encounter the absolute, like in the identity of relative and absolute, it says to encounter the absolute is not yet enlightenment, but it is an encounter. And so when we encounter the state of unity, of oneness, where body and mind fall away, where self falls away, the experience of connection, of oneness, that enlightenment experienced place, that when we talk about it is we are in form and we're failing to describe it effectively because you can't explain it, is not the same as the fact that your pet is going to get old and die, right? They're both Buddhist teachings and they're both essential, but they're not interchangeable. Does that make sense? And the reason it's important to say they're not interchangeable is because I don't want to imply that there's some underlying fixed thing that's at the root of all this, right? Because the danger is sort of saying like, and we're getting very esoteric now out of the gate, I apologize, but the danger is saying like, everything's empty because of the absolute, right? So now what we have is like, there's an underlying spiritual form that causes all the forms to have all their different forms. But the fact is we don't know what the origin of everything is, right? We don't know what the root source of everything is. But we can experience the absolute. Does that make sense? Okay, fabulous. So, the first rank really is that we meet emptiness and we don't recognize it, right? And the poem that goes with that says, in the third watch of the night, before the moon appears, no wonder when we meet, there is no recognition, right? So you don't even know what you're experiencing, right? Like you may have a profound awakening moment, but then you go, well, what was that? Or sometimes the other kind of emptiness happens in your life, and like your dog dies, or the Buddha, bore witness to suffering and death, and it causes you to shift. And now you're trying to find like, what is the solution, right? So when you're completely ignorant before the moon appears, you don't know, you have no wisdom yet, right? Then even if you meet wisdom, you don't recognize it, right? So you don't know what you're seeing yet. You don't know what it means yet. So that's the first stage. So, okay. So, second rank, the real within the apparent, right? So again, the apparent is, all the stuff, right? Forms, life, everything. So, the real is the absolute. A sleepy-eyed grandma, or grande dame, depending on your translation, encounters herself in an old mirror. Clearly she sees a face, but it doesn't resemble hers at all. Too bad, with muddled head, she tries to recognize her reflection. Right? So the mirror, what's the mirror? I'll give you a hint. You've been looking at it this evening. So the mirror is our practice, right? The mirror is our zazen. We look in, and you guys hear me saying this all the time. It's okay. This is super esoteric. I see you making a face that's like, oh, I didn't get the right answer. It's not a quiz, right? Part of why I'm giving a talk on these is because they're hard to understand. And so I want to understand them better. And one of the great ways to understand something, if you don't understand it very well, is to teach it. Because it forces you to understand it better. So a sleepy-eyed grandmother, that's us, encounters herself in an old mirror. The old mirror, the ancient mirror, is zazen. What am I always saying? To study the self, right? That's what we're doing. So when we awaken to our empty nature for the first time in meditation, right? Clearly she sees a face, but it doesn't resemble hers at all. Too bad. With muddled head, she tries to recognize her reflection, right? So, we sit and we have these experiences. We have these insights. Sometimes we have a profound connection to the absolute. Right? We experience ourselves as not separate from anything else. Right? That experience, that I can't give you, but that is an experience. Right? We don't know what to do with it when we have it. We don't realize that that's us. Right? We're not separate from that. So we talk about things like Buddha nature and true self and big mind. That place in rank 2 is not recognized as you. Right? You're trying to recognize your reflection because you're trying to fit it back into the world of form. There's a number of times that I've had the experience of people coming to me and they're like, oh my God, I had this profound experience. I said this last week, right? That, sort of psychedelic, like everything is one, it's all, it's all profound and wonderful and I get it. And they're like, how do I get back to that? A couple times I've had people come to me having had that experience and be like, oh my God, how do I keep it? But more common is like, I'll be like visiting, like I would, so my teacher, Dainin Roshi, like sometimes I'll visit his temple in Arizona and, I'll hold Daishan. And so then people who happen to be attending that retreat, which may or may not regularly be practicing with him, will come to Daishan with him or Dokusan with him. They'll come to Daishan with me. But sometimes they'll come and be like, I had this, 2 years ago, I had this, thing. And how do I get that again? Because I could tell by how profound it was that was the answer. And if I could just get back to that, then. But it's funny because, the train we're on is the Mahayana Buddhist train. And, if you follow that train to the final station, right, which is the station of saving all beings, then what you find out is that, We want to take that insight down from the mountain and bring it into the marketplace, right? We want to give it away. We want to be a benefit to others. Because otherwise, what's the point? Old school, old school Buddhism, Hinayana. I want to attain nirvana for myself. Right? Mahayana, I want to attain nirvana for all beings. But to do that, it means we have to do something with the experience beyond just, sort of sitting on it and enjoying it. We try to hold on to it. We try to fix it as a state we can get back to. We want to recreate it. And of course, profound wisdom, connection, insight, arises when it arises. And there is no state that, like, the things I say a lot, because it's really important, is there is no correct state to pursue. We have a set of ethics so that when we find ourselves in undesirable and harmful states, we can direct ourselves back out of them again, and we use our awareness to do that. And when we're in toxic, hurtful, harmful states, it's a really good idea to use our zazen to wait until that passes, so that we can do something that's wise. We think it's something to attain, but it's not. It's something we already have. And it's funny because it's a little hollow, right? Because I get to sit here every week and say, you have this thing. Your bank account is full. But the way you check your balance is by sitting. And then you have the experience that you have. And so I don't have a way to, what I can do as a teacher is create the conditions under which practice can occur. It's your role to practice. And then in that practice, discover what is within. So the second rank really is about, I see it, but I don't get it. Right? I've experienced it, but I don't know what I'm experiencing. And how cool is that, right? What a wonderful orientation toward our whole life, right? So I experience another person, but I don't know quite what I'm experiencing. It's much better than being like, I know what you're all about. And here comes the judgment. So, if you hold it loosely, there can be some flexibility in that sense of, because there's an old Tibetan saying, drive all blames into one. So if I'm looking at you and you're annoying me, it's my fault. Right? So you then become a mirror as well. And so then am I the old lady who doesn't recognize her face, or am I, do I recognize my face? That's rank 3, right? We'll get to that next week. But step 2 is at least I'm experiencing the connection. At least I'm experiencing myself. At least I'm experiencing the absolute. And I don't know what to do with it because there's nothing to do with it. There's nothing to do. I can see your lips are moving, which makes you think that you have a question and I'm interrupting you. So fire away.
I was waiting for that.
No, it's all good. I'm not upset. I'm not upset.
I don't want to interrupt the Dharma talk. So
well, it's too late now. The talk has transitioned to the question. What is the question?
Just more of a clarifying thing. Like, so with rank 2,
yeah,
based on what you said from rank 1, my understanding is this. You tell me where I went wrong.
Yeah, go ahead.
So we talked about what was it? Form.
Mm-hmm.
So in rank 2, when you don't know what you've seen, so to speak, is it reasonable to say that you mistake what you've seen as form or as some sort of absolute, and you want to impose form on it?
Well, what's your experience?
You talk about people trying to recapture this particular state, and I've heard you say many times that we all flow back and forth through states. There's no like one final stage of enlightenment where you just get there and
I mean, if there is, I'll pull over and I'll invite everyone to join. But
sure. Yeah, well, no, so I guess I'm just thinking this through out loud here.
Yeah,
Like you could mistake this encounter with the second rank as I'm curious about this. I'm trying to impose form on it, meaning I'm trying to make it part of my identity now,
sure.
or experience it as kind of the underlying absolute that you were talking about earlier that doesn't necessarily exist. I don't know if this makes sense. It makes sense to me when I'm rambling.
So you're asking the question in a way that suggests that you have some experience beyond the second rank. And of course, these all interpenetrate, right? So we go back and forth, up and down this ladder all the time. You know, when someone pulls out in front of me in traffic, like I may fall completely off the rank list entirely, right?
Yeah.
Okay, but you know, you're asking about attaching to a state as a person who has some understanding of the value of not attaching to a state, right? And so, you know, part of why these come pretty late in the koan study game, and part of the reason for that is because at that point in the path, you're teaching the person who's studying them how to be a teacher and how to identify when students are at different phases of their training, right? And so when you have a profound experience and you don't see beyond the second rank, you're not like, well, I'm going to construct it, you know, no, the automatic reaction, the natural response, the next is to identify with it, right? Like it happens like that. I mean, I think of like an experience I had, and, relatively young, and, it threw me for like, a couple of weeks, and I was, what does it mean? What does it mean about me? Am I special? Should I, does this, what does this mean for my vocation? How do I get back to that? There was no space around it, right? There was no understanding of it was just I want to talk about it. I want to tell people about it. I want to understand it. I think it probably means something really, and I'm not judging that. That's why these are steps, right? These are steps on the path, in the same way that learning to ride a bicycle, requires the coordination of multiple, becoming a Zen student and then becoming more experienced in that path requires, ongoing practice. And you begin to understand things, the person who wins the Tour de France understands things about bike riding that the 3 and 4 and 5-year-old do not, right? They're both riding bikes. It's the same activity, but it's not the same at all, right? And so in the same way, and I'm going to do a little bit of acting here, but I don't do it with any malice or judgment. I'm just sort of trying to express the answer to your question, right? So, I've had people come and, they're like, so I had this experience and I don't know, it was pretty amazing. And I want to tell you about it. And I think I get it now, right? Do you see the difference? Mm-hmm. Right? And that, again, no, I'm not doing that to make fun, right? It's just, that's a kind of it's better than I don't know, doing evil, it's better than being a drug dealer, right? But it's, and it's better that, but it's a phase, right? And the thing to know is that, so situations and because of emptiness, situations and states and awarenesses and wisdom, all the things arise all the time, right? And so, the grandmother is being pointed out here as being unwise, in the sense that they're saying, with muddled head, she tries to recognize her reflection, right? She makes it about her. So the move is, from the Dharma perspective, the move is, don't make it about you. Which you already, to some degree, understand, which is why your question doesn't express rank 2 understanding. Does that make sense?
Well, right. I mean, I think if you have that experience, maybe more than once, or simply, I don't know. It seems like the next logical step would be to realize that. Lost my train of thought. Yeah.
Talking about this stuff does that. These are extremely, like,
Well,
mind-breaky things.
I think the next logical step would be to have some curiosity about it, and that might lead you further down the path of going towards the Tour de France as a 4-year-old on a tricycle.
Right.
Right.
Right. Well, curiosity is one of the best characteristics in a Zen student. Right? The being like, what is that? I wonder what that's about. You know, I had a wonderful teacher. I'll end with this. Early in my school teaching career, I had a wonderful mentor, and I was dealing with middle schoolers, and it comes as news to no one that middle schoolers are difficult to deal with. And so, as a middle school teacher, you know, they're erupting into like peacock-like displays of all manner of behaviors, and including like, you know, sometimes really crazy or toxic or stuff. And she would always just say, this was a person who'd been teaching for like 30 years. She would always just say, well, she probably didn't do the squinty eye thing. That's my thing. But she would be like, that's good information. Right? Parent could be like, I can't believe that, you know, don't you know, blah, and she's like, that's good information. It's her response to almost everything. Right? I love that. Like whatever comes, just, that's good information. Good to know. I hate you. Oh, good to know. Right? Very profound. Profound acceptance. Right? Unflappable. You know, but it helped me as a 23-year-old to like get out of the drama. You know, the drama's happening, and that's just good information.
I'm going to use that on my daughter.
I was going to say,
I hate you.
I'm stealing that one.
No, you should. You should 100% steal it. Right. So the drama happens, and instead of being like, I need to solve it, or I need to mediate it, or it's good information. That brings you down into the centered place, and then, okay. You know, we'll see now what to do. All right. I think that's enough. I've beaten y'all up enough for the evening. Have a wonderful week.